Okay. All right, everybody, I'm going to give it a couple minutes. I see you all tuning in, and we'll get started in just one moment. I see the numbers still coming in. I also saw where some of my coworkers were just trying to log on as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'll introduce you in just a second, Alex. I was actually looking to see if I was going to be able to share my screen. Okay, everybody. Well, let's go ahead and get started. This is being recorded, so for those that aren't able to watch it right now, they'll be able to watch it later. Or for those that are tuning in, they can go back and watch it again if they would like. But hello and welcome. My name is Sarah Kirksey. I am the Senior Director of the Educational Travel Department here at the National WWII Museum. We do tours all over Europe and the Pacific. But one of our most popular, if not most popular, tour historian that goes with us on many of our trips is Dr. Alexandra Richie. And Alex is here with us today. We're going to be talking about one of her programs, the Megastructures, which is Hamburg to Warsaw. But hi, Alex, welcome.
Hello, so nice to see you. So nice to meet everybody and greet everybody. For those of you who've traveled with me before, hello again. And for those of you who haven't, welcome. And I hope we do meet each other soon.
Well, look, we have only an hour, and Alex and I were just talking about this is such a great trip. How are we ever going to be able to talk about it in 1 hour? So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in and start talking about this amazing tour. But Alex, so this is really the part two to your original trip, which is the rise and fall of Hitler's Germany, which goes Berlin to Warsaw. But let's talk a little bit. How did this tour even, come about? What was the idea behind it? What are the overall themes of this trip?
One of my obsessions, I suppose, is because I just super quick for people who haven't met before. I was born in Canada. I've got Canadian, American, British military family history. And so my natural habitat would have been working in the Pacific War, maybe the UK. But I ended up, for all sorts of various reasons, living and working in, first of all, Berlin and then in Eastern Central Europe. And I'm based in Warsaw. My house behind me is a manor house in Warsaw. And so I became very interested in the Eastern Front. And the tendency in the States, Canada, and the UK is to say, Eastern Front, nothing to do with us. There's no American story there. And in fact, there's a huge American presence, both directly and indirectly in this part of the world. And we're talking about things on this tour, for example, like the Atlantic War, U-boat war, the air war, Masters of the Air, the American POWs, and all sorts of things that happen. And so I was always thinking, how do you connect these two things? How do you make people understand that the war was, first of all, global, and there was, from the perspective of the World War II Museum, which is telling the American story, there is also an American story in Central and Eastern Europe, which is where this tour is sort of based. And so that was the thing. And I started off doing the rise and fall of Hitler's Germany, where we start in Berlin, and we look at how Hitler came to power and some of the sort of major places that he was involved in, including his wolf's lair in former East Prussia, and some of the other sites like Auschwitz. And then there was so much interest, and people were so involved and kept asking me questions. And what about other tours and other places? And they wanted to see places like Peenemünde, where Werner von Braun had his huge lab. And then we said, okay, look, let's do another tour in this part of the world. And that's how this sort of got going. And what I tried to do, and what we did at the museum tried to do, is try and find places that are really amazing, incredible sites, but also places that not that many people will ever get the chance to see without our help.
Absolutely. And, when we were scouting this, it was just incredible piecing this all together. And every day I kept saying, oh my gosh, this is the best day. but then the next day would happen and it would be like, oh my gosh, this is the best day. It's really incredible content. So let's just talk about the itinerary. Alex, we start in Hamburg, which I think now Hamburg is probably my favorite German city. I love Hamburg. But what do we do there? What do we see? Some of the highlights?
I think, first of all, you're right. A lot of people tend to think of Germany, the sort of more old Western German cities, Cologne or Munich, whatever else. But the first tour we go to Berlin, the second Hamburg, and Hamburg is an absolutely beautiful city. It was very, very badly bombed during the war. And we talk about that Gomorrah, the whole air war, this whole idea of Bomber Harris trying to destroy Germany by destroying the cities. We go to the Ohlsdorf Cemetery, which is a cemetery for those victims of the Hamburg bombing, but also a very important cemetery for Allied forces, the Commonwealth forces, for example, a huge Commonwealth war cemetery there. But Hamburg itself is an absolutely lovely place. So we go and see some very important, interesting World War II sites, but it's also a great place then to go for a walk afterwards. You by the water. It's absolutely lovely. So fantastic place for the fun things as well, like shopping and stuff like that. But Hamburg itself is really, I agree with you, one of my favorite cities in Europe.
And going back to talking about Operation Gomorrah, this is also one of our pre-tours on our big 80th anniversary cruise that we're about to do. Let's talk a little bit more about Operation Gomorrah. We go to like St. Nicholas Church, and what's so interesting to me, Alex, is really hearing and listening to the civilian experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, the church, the St. Nicholas Church, of course, a very old church. It was a 12th century church built of brick, this classical architecture of the Baltic area of the Hanseatic League. And of course, it was epicenter of the bombing raid, the Gomorrah raid. And what, of course, the British were trying to do was, Hamburg was a very old city, sort of tinderbox houses. And once it started going on fire, there was this terrible, terrible firestorm, and so many people perished. And the old St. Nicholas Church has been turned into a memorial site. And it is very, very moving because, as you say, it's the testimonials of people who survived or who saw what had happened there. People tend to think of the bombing of Dresden, but actually, in a way, what happened in Hamburg was catastrophically worse. Gomorrah. And of course, it also egged the British on to thinking that, okay, this is the way we can win the war. And of course, that was also sort of short-sighted. But what's so interesting is that we also go to something, a bunker museum in Hamburg, one of the preserved actual bunkers, underground bunkers in a garden. And you can go in underneath and you get this sense of what people went through, how terrifying it was to be bombed. Now, when we started putting these tours together, we didn't know a lot of these places existed, and then we found them, and it's such an extraordinary experience to go into sites like this and to sort of try and feel what was it like as a civilian in these places, because we tend to think about the army, the military, but what was it like just to be, living through this experience? So these are some of the things we see.
Right. And, but it's not all just Operation Gomorrah when we're in Hamburg. We also do talk about, or we visit, Neuengamme concentration camp. We do go to the Bullenhuser Dam Memorial. Can you talk a little bit about those sites as well?
Well, both of these are very important. Neuengamme was founded in 1938 by the Nazis. So it was one of the sort of earlier camps. It was a prisoner of war, a prisoner camp built in a former brick factory. And the prisoners it was just meant to be kind of a work camp to make bricks effectively, because bricks are very much the building material of that northern part of Germany. But then it started to grow and grow and grow. And over 100,000 people passed through this camp. And it was really horrific because the death toll was very high. About 50% did not survive. And I remember going with you through the camp, seeing the site of the commandant a little bit. If anybody's seen the recent film that came out about Auschwitz, and the fact that the commandant lived next to the camp, the same thing happened in Neuengamme, and it's absolutely chilling to think that that the commandant was living right there with his family and watching these terrible, terrible events unfold. And the Bullenhuser Dam, again, one of the terrible things about the Nazi regime that sometimes gets sort of pushed aside are the medical experiments that were done on human beings, and the euthanasia program, and all these also terrible things. which we have to remember, what we were fighting against. And this was one of these things, tuberculosis experiments done on small children. And then when the experiments were over, these some of the children were hanged in this terrible place. And this is a memorial to pay homage to these children and to all those thousands and thousands of people who also died in these terrible experiments with human beings. And in a way, again, it's a warning from history, the depths to which human beings can fall if we are allowed to pursue these roads to their logical conclusions effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a hard day, but it's so important. These stories and they have to be included, and we have to go to these places. But once we leave Hamburg, we are going to be heading up even closer to the Baltic coast. We're going up to Kiel. This is, for those that have never even seen the Baltic coast, everybody just wants to go put their feet in the water once you get that opportunity at the next hotel. But it's cold. But it's so pretty up there. And let's talk about the Kiel Memorial and the Naval War Memorial.
Well, this is a really amazing place because we all know and respect and pay homage to those people who die at sea. This is universal. This is something that everybody understands, and it's kind of a practice that any country with a navy understands. Okay, you may be at war even, but you also have a respect for those people who died at sea. And this was a memorial that was actually started under the Kaiser, under the Wilhelmine era, to commemorate those people who died, especially in World War I. But then the memorial was very much taken over by the Nazis, because of course, as we know and we'll talk about here, at war in the Atlantic, the U-boat war, the merchant marines and so on, the deaths was enormously important. In the Battle of the Atlantic, almost 70 or 80,000 people were killed, merchant marine and also in the Navy, and the navies, including many Americans, Canadians, Brits, and others. And so that part of the war is something we'll talk a lot about, because again, it has very much American content. But it's also very important for the fact that this memorial was then turned into kind of a Nazi shrine. And it's very interesting to go and see it and kind of get the sense of how did the Nazis commemorate, for example, the U-boat captains who became these huge mega stars in Nazi Germany. And of course, one of the things that we were able to see there is a German U-boat, U-995, which patrolled the waters of both the Baltic and the North Sea. And you're able to go on board this U-boat and actually walk through. In fact, the very famous film Das Boot was filmed partly in this U-boat. So, and what I find amazing about it is that these guys went out for weeks at a time, and I just like walk in and then get out again as quickly as possible, because it's so like, how can you possibly live in these cramped conditions? Just one person going through for me is claustrophobic, but if you imagine a whole crew living in there, I mean, it really is. It's a hugely interesting experience to just see it, and the fact that we get the chance to look at one of the last only preserved U-boats still in existence. Amazing.
It is, and I'm with you. On the first megastructures tour, I went through the U-boat, and that was enough for me. I don't think I'll ever. I am not meant to be in a submarine. I will tell you that. But it's so interesting, and our guests always do love getting to go through it and see what life was like on a submarine, on a U-boat. And then from there, though, we go to Binz. Binz is such a lovely resort town on the Baltic. For those that have been on the rise and fall of Hitler's Germany, it's something very similar to Sopot. The hotel's very similar, and it's gorgeous. It's just so beautiful to be right there on the coast. But it's also very strange to be there because of what took place there during the Nazi regime. So, Alex, I'll hand it over to you to talk about those places.
Well, it's absolutely true that Binz is one of these extremely beautiful places, and it was a resort town that you still see was already very popular in the 19th century. It's absolutely lovely sort of promenade, these beautiful kind of icing cake buildings, fantastic food, great. It's a lovely place to just take a break from World War II history and just walk along the ocean and the sea, and it's wonderful. So that's a lovely part of it. But what's also interesting is that Hitler saw this and thought, this is a really, really good place to build a huge, gigantic, largest building in Europe complex for the tourists from my KDF, Kraft der Freude, Strength Through Joy program. So when Hitler got to power in 1933, and before the war started, he was very into getting especially the workers in Germany, who very often, places like Hamburg, have been very communist, very social democratic, very left wing. And his clever idea was ban trade unions, ban all that left wing stuff, put communists in prison and so on. And let's kind of bribe these people into loving the Nazis. And one of the ways he did it was he came up with this Kraft der Freude, the Strength Through Joy program, where the workers would get a free holiday for a week or a week and a half in places like Prora, near Binz, on the ocean, these gigantic apartment kind of hotel complexes with cinemas where you could hear Nazi propaganda, and lecture halls where someone like Goebbels might show up and give you a speech, and all of these things. It's absolutely this amazing, gigantic, huge complex, which gives you a sort of sense of that sort of megastructure side of the program, where the Germans invested so much into, in effect, trying to bribe the population into supporting them. But these big megastructure projects, especially before the war, were also used to create employment. So in other words, the organization Todt, named after Fritz Todt, was just employing people to build these huge sites to get the Germans employed again, to make it look as if the German economy was doing so well. And all of these things we'll talk about. It's so interesting, such an interesting part of that history. And then, of course, aside from that, and going back to Binz, the other thing that's absolutely amazing, and I think to me, one of the highlights of the tour, the great draws of the tour, is going to the Peenemünde research facility. Peenemünde was where the V1 and V2 rockets were created, developed by none other than Wernher von Braun, who later, under Operation Paperclip, ends up going to the United States as the top scientist, becomes the head of NASA, effectively convinces JFK to start to send, let's beat the Soviets in the Cold War, because they started off with Sputnik. So let's beat them and put the first man on the moon. And that's and he's such an important, controversial, interesting figure, genius, brilliant scientist, and yet was aware of the slave laborers who worked on the V1 and especially V2 rockets, and so on. So this is a fantastically interesting place to go. To me, amazing. Of course, Peenemünde was bombed, but there's still a lot left of the labs, of the scientific facilities, and so on. And just to add in, because this also ties in with one of my other obsessions with this tour, which is how it fits in with the American and British Allied air war. Because the Germans, one of the themes of the tour is how the Germans have to keep moving eastward and keep doing new things in order to compensate for the fact that the Ruhr and Hamburg and all these other places are being bombed in the west. And they have to keep moving either underground or eastward. And another theme of the tours is how they do this. So in the example of Peenemünde, it's bombed, very directly bombed, and lots of destruction takes place. Wernher von Braun and Albert Speer, who's also involved in this, go, okay, obviously the Allies are going to keep bombing this place. What are we going to do? So they build this huge, really terrible underground V2 factory in Nordhausen, where prisoners basically go underground and they never come back out again. And this is one of the things that is used at the Nuremberg trials, for example, to sort of look at people like Albert Speer and say, hang on a minute, did you know about this? Of course, he said no. But so it's fascinating how it links again into the American air war. If any of you, I absolutely recommend you watch Masters of the Air before you come on this tour, because you see the air war and then the consequences that were faced by the Americans who went down in these areas, but also the destruction that was wrought by them.
Right. And one thing that we're doing different this year, just give you a bit of the operations behind on this tour, is, in the past 2 years, we've taken the bus from the hotel to Peenemünde. but all our guests the last couple of years wanted to be able to be on the Baltic Sea, going back to that. So the National WWII Museum has actually chartered a very nice boat that's going to take you along the coast, and so we will be dropped off right at Mundo, right at its doorstep. So no bus that day. I think this will be a great addition to the tour, and I'm excited. Yeah.
Oh, it's so exciting. I'm so thrilled by this because, really, I've done a couple of National Geographic and other filming on the Baltic, and going out in little boats and looking at World War II sites, out in the sea. And there's really nothing like being on the water, just seeing it. It's very calm. There's no roughness or anything like that. But you just get a totally different perspective. And particularly when we're talking about World War II, the U-boats, the ships that were going, Operation Hannibal, when the Germans were trying to evacuate the ships at the end of the war, and the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff, which is commemorated at the Kiel Memorial, the largest naval disaster in maritime history. And seeing this from the water is amazing from the World War II perspective, but it's also great fun. Yes. You get to actually be on board, and you can relax and take in the view, and just sort of not necessarily be all World War II all the time. It's also just a lovely thing to do. So it's really, really exciting. And then just step off at Peenemünde. Fantastic.
It is. I'm excited. So for those that are going with us this year, I can't wait to hear what you have to say in those post-tour surveys. But so then the next morning we are leaving Germany, and now we're going into Poland, which of course you live in Poland. I studied in Poland. We love bringing our guests to Poland, and it's always it's kind of sad to say bye to Germany, but then it's also this excitement of being back where this country that we love. We head towards Chechen, and of course we start off with a great lunch. It's one of my favorite restaurants on this tour. It's the Christopher Columbus restaurant. A lot of times our guests think it's a joke, but it's not. It's the restaurant is the inside of the shape of the ship. We're just carrying on this Navy maritime theme, but it's great fun, and it's just the perfect way to welcome you to Poland. But then that afternoon, though, talking about going to those places that are off the beaten path, that you're never going to go unless you're with the National WWII Museum and with Alex. We then go to the special museum that's run by the volunteers. So Alex, talk about that.
Well, this is amazing. Again, finding these incredible places that are so important. Were so important to German production. Albert Speer, who becomes Hitler's armaments minister, becomes a very important figure on this tour, because he's the one who keeps trying to come up with these new ways to keep the German war effort going. And he's actually, unfortunately for us, quite successful at it. He's very talented, he's very a good organizer, and he's very creative, and he's able to get people to do what he wants, largely, except for Hermann Goering. But anyway, he comes up with these ideas. For example, creating the Politz synthetic oil refinery. Now, one of the big problems that the Germans had was fuel. Once, they thought that they were going to go and bash into Russia and get all the oil that they wanted, but it didn't work that way. And so they had to quickly come up with alternatives. And we go and see one of the remaining synthetic oil refineries at Politz. It's just incredible. So much of it still exists. It's enormous terrain, actually. And of course, in those days, it would have been all top secret. You wouldn't have been able to see it. We see just a little bit of it. And what's so wonderful is that this is a place that's just been kind of abandoned and is run by volunteers, and they have normal, regular jobs, and they race to the museum to open it up and show us things that nobody else would ever go there. It's not like a tourist site. It doesn't have, all those things. And this is what's so amazing, because you go in and you almost can imagine what it would have looked like if you sort of half close your eyes in 1945, when the Red Army was coming through. This is the town, Szczecin, or Stettin used to be called. It's right on the German-Polish border. And in fact, again, another topic of discussion is Yalta, and the discussion about where the borders were going to be between Poland and Germany. And Churchill's sort of saying, well, no, maybe we should keep Stettin in Germany, and Stalin saying, no, I want Szczecin to be in Poland because it moves his borders further eastward, further westward. And these are really fascinating discussions for those of you who are interested in that sort of geopolitical side. But going to these museums, and the Hydrowerke in museum as well was another, the Politz synthetic gasoline factory, is just extraordinary. Another element to it is the huge pool of slave laborers that were used all over the Reich, and this is no exception. We talk about that as well.
So the next day, we do two things. It's been a lot of heavy content up to this point. It's a little bit of the middle of the trip. Some people are kind of tired. So we have an optional city tour for those that want to stay back. And I've done that the last 2 years with our guests. You get to see the beautiful cathedral, a walk through the old town. This is, some guests like to just stay back and read at our hotel. It's right on the lake and in a park. It's a beautiful location. And so for those that just kind of want to have a reset, it's perfect for them. However, for those that are just ready to take on more World War II, we go out to the V3 bunker. So Alex, you've done this the last 2 years. It's tons of fun. Talk about that.
But this to me is like a personal highlight because it's amazing. Most people who know a bit about World War II know the V1 rocket and they know about the V2 rocket, but very few people know that there was a V3. What are these things? Hitler, very fortunately, if any of you have seen the film Oppenheimer, and again, I would highly recommend that you watch it before you come on this tour because it does tie into the scientific themes that we're talking about. Thankfully, the Manhattan Project went ahead in the United States, and the bomb was created in the United States, and the Germans, because Hitler thought that nuclear physics was quote unquote Jewish science, he didn't pursue the atomic bomb, but he thought he was very clever and he was going to pursue other secret wonder weapons instead. So he comes up with the V1 and then the V2, which is the first actual rocket. And then they decide that the V2 is actually ridiculously expensive because you're building these rockets which cost $1 million Reichsmarks each, and they actually kill about 6 people on average or something like this, and lots of them fail. So as the war moves toward its conclusion, they start to come up with cheaper and easier options. And one of them is the V3. And this is amazing because basically they're these huge tubes that are put up on the sides of the hills with just a sort of propulsion all the way up the tubes. And we go to the actual site. The hills are there. The launch areas are there. A lot of these tubes still exist. There's a kind of very, again, small museum run by a completely passionate local guy who just loves this stuff. And we go and see this. It's incredible. Who knew? And he explains how these multiple explosive charges work. And these rockets were supposed to be directed specifically on London. And hundreds of these very cheap projectiles were supposed to just be launched on London. And this was, according to Hitler, going to completely change the war. Now, a lot of people ask me, why did the Germans fight, to the bitter end? Why didn't they stop? One of the reasons was that Hitler kept spreading it around, and his scientists and so on, that we've got these secret weapons. We've got these wonder weapons, and they are going to win the war. And one of them was V2, and another one of them was this almost unknown V3, and we get to see it.
And it's a true off-road experience. It's in the middle of the woods. You get dropped off by the bus, and then you just start to walk. But every guest that has gone on this, they get back to the hotel, and I'm greeting everybody with a glass of wine or champagne, and everybody's all grins, and they're just, this was awesome. So it is a great day. Kind of what I was saying earlier, it's just every day just keeps getting better. So then the next morning that we leave, we go to Bigos. And this is probably my personal favorite, is going to the Pomeranian Wall. I will just never forget that when we were scouting, the first time I saw this bunker, and I was like, wow, that's a big bunker. But then it just kept going, and I just could not believe the size. And I wish I could actually share my screen. I can't, but there's this photo of me, and it's the middle of the winter, we were scouting, but you really can't see me except for my red beret. And it's just, I'm a little dot next to this massive bunker. So Alex, talk about the Pomeranian Wall and that stop.
Well, okay, this is another thing that a lot of people have heard of, the Maginot Line, the huge fortifications that the French built after World War I. And this was supposed to be a line that was going to defend the French from any future attack. Well, of course it didn't, because what did the Germans do? The Second World War, they did the same things before. They went through the Ardennes, go through Belgium, and oops, sort of didn't learn from history. And we all thought, they all thought that Hitler was all into blitzkrieg and lightning war and everything else. But as the war progressed, Hitler starts to go a little bit more and more crazy. And he seems to go back to his World War I mentality. And he does something which is very, very strange. And again, not that many people know about, but he builds this thing called the Pomeranian Wall, which is almost like a copy of the Maginot Line in the east, supposedly to prevent the Red Army from getting through. And it is massive. So what we see, we stop at some of them and see these gigantic bunkers that Sarah was talking about, and then these underground tunnels and these huge, it's just unbelievable, just massive. And we just see a tiny fraction of it. And this again, he seems to have gone a bit crazy to build this sort of Maginot Line World War I type fortification all the way down what's going to be what he thinks is the kind of Polish-Russian demarcation border. And we just see a glimpse of it, but it is extraordinary. And some of these bunkers have kind of been turned on their sides because they tried to blow them up after the war, but it's impossible. And there's a museum there, which again is run by locals, and it's fantastic, full of enthusiasm, and you just see the most extraordinary things. It's just, again, the concept of it. This is again showing the desperation of what Hitler's Germany was trying to do to kind of compensate for the fact that actually the Western Allies are coming in from the air, from North Africa, Italy, then from the Normandy landings, and the Soviets are coming in from the other side, and they're just desperately scrambling for either wonder weapons or the Pomeranian Wall or whatever it might be. And you just see how much effort they put into these final years to try and protect themselves, of course, to no avail. So it's an amazing, amazing place to go.
And then that afternoon, though, we go to the Explosium Museum, just another one of those sites that are just, it really is just incredible.
Yeah, I did a National Geographic Megastructures show on the Explosium some time ago, and this opened my eyes to this place. Once again, this is the fact that the bombing raids in the West are destroying all the munitions factories. And at that point, when they start building up what's now called the Explosiums, one of the huge DAG Fabrik Bromberg, because Bydgoszcz used to be called Bromberg when it was part of the German Reich. And they think that this area is going to be too far away for the Western bombers. So they build this, again, gigantic complex. And we get to go through part of it. Again, most of it's still intact. Most of it still exists. But we only get to go, because of timing, just through a little bit of it. But you see how they build the walls, the structures, so that if there's a nitroglycerin explosion, that the whole place won't blow up, and how the walls blow outwards and the glass blows this way. And just talk a little bit about the history of Alfred Nobel and how these chemicals and so on were created, and then how the Germans tried, again, desperately to try and create these factories in the middle of nowhere. Again, forced labor were expected to work there, or forced to work there. But it's just, again, one of those places that an ordinary tourist going through Poland will never think of going to see. And so, again, amazing place, and a wonderful tour there through some of these sites.
Yes. And, this has kind of been the problem on all our tours. It doesn't matter where we go. There's a guest that's always saying, please, can we stay another hour? It's not long enough. It never is. It's never long enough, but it's such an amazing stop, and walking through this former factory. And but so the next day, though, Alex, you've been talking about the air war, and overall, when you look at this tour, you might not realize that there is so much of an American experience when we talk about this tour, but specifically the next day, when we go to Schubin, this is the day that we really are talking about the American experience in World War II. So talk about the monument and where we go that morning.
Well, I think Schubin, just to explain it, is the largest American POW camp in the Reich. And it's enormous. There were 1,600 or so Americans held there by the end of the war, A lot of them, this was it wasn't for the airmen so much as the ground forces officers. So a lot of these men came from North Africa, they came from Sicily, from Italy, and they were put in this camp. And so there's a monument to the men who died there. It was also a camp earlier for Brits and so on. And in fact, there was an escape attempt. 33 men escaped. And after by the Brits, again, similar to the Great Escape, people know more about Stalag Luft 3, the scene of the Great Escape. There was a Great Escape from Shubin as well. And these 33 men escaped. And then the British and Commonwealth forces were moved to Stalag Luft 3, ironically. And then it became a huge American POW camp from 1943 to the end of the war. And what's really interesting, again, from the American story, is that this camp was the scene or site of one of the death marches for American POWs. About 1,400 POWs were sent to march in January 1945 in the freezing cold, and as absolutely one of the coldest winters in memory. And only about 490 of them survived. And these terrible and grueling conditions. It's an American tragedy, an American story. And one of the things about the camp that's so incredibly touching is that, again, it's a kind of local effort. It's not a big, huge, glass in cases and stuff like that. And there's so many documents, diaries, sketches, trinkets, homemade chess sets, and all these kinds of things that just stayed in the camp, and that was liberated by the Soviets. There were only a few prisoners, about 80 prisoners who were too sick to even move. And all of these things still exist. And so you can actually touch a lot of these objects. They haven't put them behind cases and so on, which, I'm sure museum curators out there be going, how can you do this? But then for us, the experience is amazing because you've got this tremendously moving stories, diaries, pictures, and drawings by these men who were imprisoned there, and then knowing that so many of them didn't survive the death march to the west. It's just harrowing, but also, again, we always on the World War II museum tours lay a wreath in memory of the Americans who died in the war. It's some site that we see, and this is the site we've chosen for obvious reasons, that so many Americans were held there for often 2 years or more, and then lost their lives on this terrible freezing death march, where if they stumbled or fell in the snow, they were killed, and so on. And I think it's a story that's not that well known in the United States, and I think it's something that we try to commemorate.
And so when we leave there, we do have a group lunch in Torin, which, correct my pronunciation, Alex, if needed. But it's such a it's a beautiful place. We go. It was not destroyed in the war, correct?
No, Torin is one of the absolute gems. People who've been to Poland may know Krakow, for example. And there are these little gems all over Europe, and Torin is one of them. It was founded by the Teutonic Knights. It's all sort of old brick buildings. It wasn't destroyed. It's absolutely beautiful. And because of the way that the trade routes changed over history, it was kind of forgotten for about 400 years. So it kind of is like a cocooned in aspic. And therefore you go back and you're in these. So the restaurant we go to is this wonderful kind of brick, kind of beautiful domed roof and fantastic food, which I have to say is a feature of this whole tour. Just beautiful food, because it's contrary to what people think, and I don't mean that we're going to have vegan meals, but Poland, for example, is the highest percentage per capita of vegan restaurants in all of Europe, because it's sort of leapfrogged into new and very, very wonderful kind of whole grain and lovely organic foods and stuff like that, but very, very tasty, very delicious, and also quite traditional. So, and this is what we have in this wonderful meal in Torin. But it is a beautiful town, and we have a few minutes just to walk around and see a little bit of the architecture before we head to our final trip.
Yes, that's where next we go to Warsaw, which as you mentioned, you live there in Warsaw. I mentioned that I studied in Warsaw. So that really is going home for you, but for me as well. I love bringing our guests to Warsaw. We stay at the beautiful Hotel Bristol, which is in the old town. But we have quite an itinerary in Warsaw. For those that have been on the rise and fall of Hitler's Germany, they always want to go back because they didn't get to see enough. But it's actually two different itineraries. The hotel is the same, but everything else is different. So talk about some of the sites that we go and see when we're in Warsaw.
I have to agree with you that going in back to Warsaw, and I know that every time you go to Warsaw, like there are like 20 new buildings you didn't expect. It's one of those growing, incredibly energetic, exciting cities in the world actually right now, and it's fantastic to see. But and the Bristol is one of the great hotels of all. It's probably the best hotel in Poland for certainly for what we are doing, and within walking distance of the old town, all these beautiful sites. But we also do this very interesting program that's nothing to do with what we do on Rise and Fall, despite staying in the same hotel. So the first really amazing thing we do is go to Treblinka. Now, in the Rise and Fall, we go to Auschwitz, Auschwitz-Birkenau. But in my personal view, I think Treblinka is, I don't want to say worse, that's the wrong word, but it's so shocking that over 850,000 people, that's the lowest estimate for the numbers who were killed there, died just over 1 year. Auschwitz was in operation for 5 years. Treblinka just over a year. All the Jewish populations in Warsaw and the environs of Warsaw were taken there in these sort of shocking transports. And the other thing is it wasn't a work camp. It was simply there for extermination. Out of those 850 plus people, only 70 people survived. 70 out of 850,000 were killed in a year. And so we go there. It's a shocking place, but again, it's this warning from history. It's like it's a sort of place that you don't want to go, but it's sort of I believe that in honoring the victims, I believe in knowing and remembering this history, because precisely if we don't do it, we don't get a warning from history, but we also don't remember these people and the victims, and we don't learn the lessons from this sort of thing. So I think it's just so important to try and commemorate and remember. It's a very somber place. The one thing that's that that I try to do is put it in context. I mean, talk about what did people know? How were they to react? What does this history mean to us today? What does it mean to, in a sense, I would say, have the privilege of going to a place like this and being able to then take that knowledge back to people who might never be able to travel to a place like Poland and say, look, this is what I saw, this is what I learned there. And this is very much that part of the educational travel that the World War II Museum tries to do, whether it's in the Pacific or in Europe.
And I'm so sorry, Alex. I don't know if it froze on your end, but I got a couple of messages. It did freeze there for a second, and I hate that it froze and when we're in the middle of talking about Treblinka, because this is really probably one of the worst stops, and maybe that's not the right word for us to use, but it's one of the most important stops for us to go, and it's very hard to go there. But as Alex was saying before she got cut off, so many people perished and were killed there, and it is important that we keep this in the itinerary. But something that we also want to do is not just talk about the heavy, horrible history though of Warsaw, because there's also beauty in Warsaw. And so that evening though, and to me, this is one of the best parts of the trip is we go back and you have time a little to reflect and to think, but then we go to a Chopin concert. We have it there at our hotel. We have this pianist come in on the grand piano. We have a reception, and we have about a 30-minute, 40-minute concert. Alex, share the history of Chopin and what he means in Poland.
Well, the thing is that where our hotel is basically where Chopin lived and worked. He was born just outside of Warsaw and then spent his young years in Warsaw. And it's so touching because all up and down the street near where the hotel is, you see, okay, this is where he gave his first concert. This is where he studied, and there's a Chopin museum and so on. And Chopin's music, of course, is beautiful, but it also is so touching because it is the story of Poland. Poland, which continuously, like the city of Warsaw, rises from the ashes, rebuilds with this energy, always this idea of freedom above anything else. They'll give their lives to fight for freedom. Second oldest constitution in the world after the United States, Kosciuszko and all the other great revolutionaries who ended up going to the States because they were unable to carry on in Poland. And Chopin is one of those people who loved his homeland, but ended up as an exile in Paris because of the Russian takeover of Poland, and all these exiles had to either go or be incarcerated. And so this is again the story through music this time of this tremendous history. And we're living through one of those phases, this great optimistic phase in Polish and Warsaw history, which if Chopin had seen it, he would have been just amazed by. And I guess that's the other side of it. So we see a lot of this terrible history. It's a very, very dark history, actually, and some of these things which are so thought-provoking. But there is joy as well. I mean, even we go to the Warsaw Zoo, where the zookeeper's wife, maybe some of you have seen the movie or read the book about the zookeeper's wife, and this whole organization in Poland that tried to save Jews. And one of the places that so many people were saved was the zoo, because they were able to hide people who were trying to hide from the Nazis in these sort of places where they could have water and food brought to them and the Nazis wouldn't notice. So this is, again, a place of survival, a place of optimism, and even in these dire circumstances, these bright notes can happen. And the Chopin concert, I think, is tremendously moving. And then, you know, it's a chance also to get to know Warsaw a little bit in this bright, shining light in Europe at the moment.
And you know, we still have a whole other day of touring, but we're kind of running out of time, Alex. And because I also want to talk about what the guests say outside of the content of the tour is the biggest highlight is actually going to the farewell dinner at your house, which you're seeing the library, you're right there. Alex, her family, they just open up their home and let us just come in. Of course, everybody's always asking if we can stay the night. No, we can't. We all have to go back to the Hotel Bristol. But Alex, the history of your home, though, it's so fascinating.
Well, it is amazing. There was there are the big palaces in Poland, like everywhere else. Poland was a hugely important European place during the Renaissance and so on. But so this isn't a big palace. This is what's called a dvor. It's a manor house. It's I suppose like the old rectories in England. And this is an equivalent. And there were thousands and thousands of them in Poland before the war. They were destroyed during the war and also after the war by communism, because people weren't allowed to have places like this. During the war, it's a fascinating history because it becomes ahead of the Wehrmacht officers are stationed here, particularly in the run-up to Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. And then when the Russians are pushing the Germans back in this area, it becomes the head of the Viking SS headquarters, which is incredible. And because of that, they used this area to repair tanks and keep their equipment. There was huge battles that went around the house in July, August, into September 1944. So I have found, my family have found all these, you know, shrapnel and helmets that you can see behind me, and all these other things, bayonets and all sorts of other stuff, which I talk about when you come here. And I just love opening up the house because it's so wonderful that it was saved. It was almost ruined. It was almost falling to pieces. All the other buildings on the property have gone. And it's also a way to tell that other story of Poland, what happened during the war and the destruction during the war, but also the fact that Poland wasn't able to be free after the war. It was under the Soviet rule. And then in 1989, of course, this great, huge upsurge of optimism and joy when the communist system was thrown off. And we are now able to enjoy, you know, actually be in a Polish manor house in a free country, which is amazing. And so I love the dinner here, and people are free to walk around and see, look around and take books off the shelves and talk about how we restored this place and what it means and so on. So it's absolutely wonderful. Also, my husband is always here. He's an interesting person. I met him at Oxford, but he was born in Warsaw and then studied in England, and that's where we met. But he's since come back to Poland and is now Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs in the Polish government. So for those of you who are interested in foreign affairs or foreign policy or whatever it might be, he's always on hand to talk about issues and be at the dinner and so on. And sometimes my two girls are here as well, but I can't guarantee them because they're, you know, sort of, I don't know where they'll be, but anyway, at least my husband will be here to talk and chat.
And if they do get to meet Max and Coco, they are in for a treat with that as well. Beautiful just brilliant girls. They clearly take after their mother and their father. But it's so fun to meet the entire family. But also too, your two dogs. It's so fun having the poodles come and greet us, and it really is just such a special way to end the trip. We do it
Well, the
on
other
both.
thing I just wanted to quickly say is that,
Yep.
yes, we see a lot of some very difficult places and so on. But one of the things I love about doing the tours is that we all sort of come together, and by the end, when we have this farewell dinner, it's just this lovely, lovely atmosphere where we've gotten to know each other because you've seen things that make you think and make us talk. So one of the things I do all the way through the tour, I don't just sort of give a talk and then disappear. I'm with you the whole time, and I'm always open for questions and want to talk about things. And then, usually in the evening during dinner or after dinner, you can always find me with a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or whatever, and always ready to talk and have Q&A sessions whenever we could find a quiet place. So that's something I love to do. And so by the end, it just creates this wonderful atmosphere, and whatever people's views before they start, it just, I think, just creates a fantastic experience for everybody.
It does, and it's so many people play a part in this incredible tour. It's Alex obviously as the featured historian. You have Barbara, your Polish tour manager, who's also a guide. If you ever go to Krakow, that's who you want to guide you. She's so passionate, and gosh, we just couldn't do these tours without her. We do try to have someone from the museum. The last couple of years I was there. This year my colleague Ellie, she'll be joining you. We have the locals and the volunteers, and sometimes we also have special appearances, whether it's a Polish Home Army veteran or someone from the American Embassy. We have all of these wonderful people that come and take a part in this tour. And like you said, Alex, by the time we get to Warsaw, the farewell dinner, everybody is just a family. And then ready to talk about the next trip that we're all going to do together,
Yeah,
and we're starting to run out of time, like I said, but there was just a couple more things I did want to say. And for those that have traveled with us before, that we take a lot of pride in giving you the best experience possible. Of course, the content, that's our main goal, is to make sure that you are here to learn and hear the stories of not just the American experience, but everybody that, in World War II is, like Alex said, a global war. There's so much to talk about. But also our hotels, beautiful 4 or 5 star hotels, some of the best, you can get in any of the cities. A lot of them we try to find somewhere with the World War II history or content, connection. And, from Hamburg at the Grand Atlantic all the way to the Hotel Bristol, it's beautiful accommodations. The meals, it's so important for me to go when you're in Poland to get a Polish experience. We want you to try the pierogies or the local dishes, and and we always do. We have fun. We have along excuse me, on our trips, it's unlimited beer and wine, but of course coffee, tea, sodas. It's just wonderful accommodations and meals. But Alex, is there anything else you want to add about the overall tour, or anything we didn't? I know there was some that we didn't get to talk about. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, there's some places and sites that we just have run out of time. But I think really the key is that we go to some small and very out of the way places. But we start in Hamburg, which, as I said, is a beautiful city, and in Warsaw, which is stunning and incredible. They call it the Phoenix City, and the nice thing about being in these cities, both when you arrive and when you leave, is that you can find everything there. You can, if you want to do some shopping for friends and family before you go home, there's lots to do and lots to get. And Warsaw's like a Western city anywhere in the world. I mean, it's amazing. Same with Hamburg. So if you've forgotten something on your journey, you're set. And that's the nice thing as well, that it's so luxurious. It's so everybody's so kind, and as I said, everybody who works with the group, you mentioned Barbara, and everybody who comes along from the museum, and the people that we meet along the way, and the hotel staff and so on, they now know us, and they're really wonderful. So it's that atmosphere and that very special kind of warmth, I think, that we seem to be so lucky with the people who join us on these tours, plus the people who help make them all happen. And it's just a remarkable experience, I would say.
It is. And, one thing that those that are tuning in, you're going to be the first to hear it. It's a bit of a surprise announcement. But, the last couple years, and even when we were creating this tour, Alex and I just never felt like the name was right. It was good. It covers a part, a part of the tour, but not all of the tour. And so we really just, since the last trip, we've been thinking, what do we want to call this tour? We asked past travelers. We worked with the team here at the museum, and I'm very excited to have this announcement. So, Alex, why don't you announce the newest name of this tour?
Well, megastructures is definitely in the background, but what we decided to do was, again, bring this idea of the Atlantic War, the air war, the fight that we had to bring the Nazi regime to heel. So it's what they fought against, and then scars of the Nazi war machine. And that's, I think, really encompasses these two strands of it. That is what the Nazis themselves were trying to do. And as I said, I just had a very short time to talk about this, is scrambling, getting new mega weapons, V2s, Peenemünde, all this stuff, but also our fight against them, and how the air war, how the fight against the U-boats, the war in the Atlantic, the other things that were done, the war in from North Africa and Italy with the American POWs in Schubin. In other words, the fight against this huge, gigantic machine, and Hitler's attempt to take over the world, and how very much thanks to thanks to the Allied effort, that finally we managed to prevail. But it was not easy, and it shows the sacrifices and the difficulties and the things that we were up against effectively. And so that's why we tried to juxtapose the two in this title.
And so we actually have a couple of spaces left for this July. If you are wanting to join us on what they fought against, we have space for 2024, but we also have dates for 2025. Please go to our website, call our travel department, come and talk to us about this trip. We would love to welcome you on what they fought against, the scars of the Nazi war machine. But before we close off, I do want to just share a couple more things about Alex's trips and where you can catch her, either abroad or here at the National WWII Museum. Alex is part of our presidential counselors. She comes to the international conference on World War II. It's held here in New Orleans every year. It's the weekend before Thanksgiving. I would love for you to come and see her. She does lectures and panels. And of course, we get to mingle and talk to all the other amazing historians that come here for conference. Alex's trip, we've mentioned a couple of times, the rise and fall of Hitler's Germany, going from Berlin to Warsaw. That trip, we're actually completely sold out for 2024, but we do have dates for 2025. Your tour is actually about to start next week, Alex. It's crazy.
Yes.
The first one's already here.
I can't wait. I love doing this, because I mean, just to say, I'm a professor of history and I write books, and that's what I do. So for me, going on tours it's like a holiday. It's like, wow, this is great. It's like get to get out from behind my desk. So for me, I love these tours. Like, for me, it's amazing. And by the way, at the conference next November, I'm going to be talking with Prit Buttar, who's written a number of books about this very region, the former East Prussia and the battles that took place. So this is going to be sort of very much in this theme. So I'm really looking forward to that as well.
And, for those that can't come here to New Orleans, the international conference is always live streamed, or you can watch it later. It's recorded just like this, except it's, not on a Zoom, but you can watch it anytime. So please make sure you do tune in, especially for Alex's session, excuse me. But I want to end with one more high and new exciting thing that's coming out of the travel department. So next year, it's the 80th anniversary, end of the war, and we have a very special tour to announce. Again, this is a sneak peek. You're the first ones hearing about it. But Alex, along with Dr. Michael Nyberg, we are going to be sailing from Prague to Berlin on a Viking cruise, the Bela, beautiful Viking ship, amazing tour stops and content, incredible historians, Alex and Mike, who are also dear friends. And then we'll go into Berlin. There'll be an optional post tour, a victory in Europe. It'll be there. We'll be there on May 8th. So be looking for that as well. It's next May. I hope I see you on either the rise and fall of Hitler's Germany, what they fought against, or on the Elbe. So much to do with Alex and all of the travel team. Thank you so much to everybody for being here. Alex, do you have anything else you want to add or say, or
no, just I hope I really look forward to meeting you and welcoming you on any of these tours, because I really have to say I don't do tours for anybody else. I don't do any of this stuff for anybody else. I do it for the World War II Museum because it's very, very special. It's a combination of luxury and camaraderie and everything done so professionally, and content, which is things that you don't get to see in other places. And also the fact that the people who come on these tours have just are of a wonderful standard. I don't know how else to say it, just wonderful people. And that's why I think we get this rapport, because people come from all sorts of different backgrounds and all sorts of different interests. And yet what brings them together is this shared interest in what happened in World War II. And even for those who don't know anything much about this region or this particular history, what we learn time and time again is how much we owe those people, those men and women who sacrificed their lives or their health or their mental health or whatever it might be for fighting for our freedom. And there's nowhere you feel that more in a place like Poland, where it's a free, safe, fantastic country that's really risen out of the ashes of World War II. But so much thanks to the Americans who fought, and we do really dedicate these tours to them and also remember them on the tours too.
Yes, and actually I have nothing else to say to that because she's closing it perfectly. So thank you, Alex, for being here with me today. Thank you to all of you that tuned in. I look forward to bringing you all to Poland. Give us a call. I'm so sorry we didn't get to show photos or doing Q&A, but you can call the travel department. I can always answer your questions and get the answer from our historian. Thank you again, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.